2 years ago, I met Jay at a friend's barbecue, and from the moment we locked eyes, it was like the universe had conspired to bring us together. Our connection was instant, effortless, and electric, a whirlwind romance that felt straight out of a feel-good movie. We were that couple everyone envied, always laughing, holding hands, cooking together, and planning adventures. Life seemed perfect, and nothing ever came between us until my job did. As the demands of my career grew, so did the distance between us. Late nights at the office, constant work calls, and a schedule that seemed never-ending started to take a toll. What once was a life filled with shared moments began to feel like a faded memory, but I wasn't ready to give up. In a desperate attempt to salvage what we had, I planned a romantic getaway to Italy, hoping the beauty of the place would reignite the spark we had lost. What happened there, though, was far from what I expected. I had always thought the drifting apart between Jay and me was just a phasier result of my hectic work schedule, something I could fix once I got back on track. But as days turned into weeks, the cracks in our relationship became impossible to ignore. The late nights at the office became routine. Weekend plans were canceled, with nothing but hollow apologies to fill the space between us. I could see it in Jay's eyes. The sadness, the exhaustion, the way her once carefree smile no longer reached her eyes. Every time I came home, she was glued to her phone, just like I was. Our conversations, once filled with laughter and shared plans, turned into awkward silences. Even the simplest tasks, like having dinner together, felt like a chore, something to tick off the to-do list rather than an opportunity to connect. I knew something had to change, or I would lose her. The guilt gnawed at me every day. I had promised her that work wouldn't come before us. Every day, I broke that promise. It felt like I was losing the person who once meant the world to me, and I couldn't just let it happen. So, I decided to plan something special, a grand gesture, to show her how much she still meant to me. Italy seemed like the perfect place, a romantic escape to a land full of beauty, history, and passion. Jay had always dreamed of visiting, and I thought maybe this trip could reignite what we once had. When I told her about the trip, I saw a flicker of excitement in her eyes, a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with. I thought we were on the mend, that this getaway would be our fresh start. But I couldn't have been more wrong. What happened on the last day of our trip would change everything, and I wasn't prepared for the storm that was about to hit. The last day in Italy was supposed to be the culmination of our journey, a moment to reflect, laugh, and reconnect after the emotional distance that had been growing between us. The picturesque cliffside in Naples, with its endless view of the Mediterranean, was supposed to be the backdrop of our renewed love. I could feel the warmth of the sun, the salty breeze in the air, and the quiet promise of something new. For a fleeting moment, I believed we were finally on the same page, ready to take the next step together. But then, out of nowhere, Jay dropped the bombshell that would shatter everything. She told me she needed more time alone. She wanted to stay in Italy to find herself and think about our relationship without me. The words hit me like a slap in the face. My heart stopped, and the world around me seemed to blur. I had spent weeks planning this trip, thinking it would heal us, bring us back to the place where we first met. And now, standing there on that cliff, I realized how completely wrong I had been. I was frozen, unable to process the shock. She hadn't said a word before this, not a hint, not a single clue. It felt like a betrayal, not just of the trip we had planned, but of everything we had built. I was speechless, caught between anger, confusion, and overwhelming sadness. How could she do this? Was I that blind? As the tension hung between us, I knew I couldn't just let this slide. I couldn't accept being left behind, not after everything. So, in the heat of the moment, I told her if she wanted to stay, she would have to take on the financial responsibility of the trip. My heart ached with each word, but it was the only way I could maintain some semblance of control. Jay's reaction was immediate and fierce. Her voice cut through the air, accusing me of not supporting her. And the words stung. But inside I felt something snap, and I knew that the road we had been walking together had ended. The moment I spoke those words, the air around us thickened with tension. Jay's face changed, her expression morphed from one of uncertainty to fury in an instant. The words I had just spoken felt like a finality, and as soon as I saw the hurt in her eyes, I realized the depth of the damage done. I had never imagined that a trip meant to heal our relationship would end in this way, with anger and betrayal hanging in the air like a suffocating fog. The fight escalated quickly, faster than I could even process what was happening. Her voice shook with a mixture of frustration and desperation as she accused me of using money to manipulate her decision. "How can you just cut me off like this? Is this how you show love?" she screamed, her words slicing through me. I tried to stay calm, to explain that it wasn't about the money, but she wasn't listening. It wasn't about the trip anymore. It was about boundaries, about respect, and right now it felt like I had none in her eyes. Her words stung in ways I hadn't expected. She was right. In a way, if I had truly supported her, would I have let it come to this? But in that moment, I couldn't back down. If she wanted to stay in Italy, to find herself, as she said, then she had to understand that this decision was hers alone to make. And so, as my heart broke with each passing second, I stood firm, my voice a mix of pain and resolve. "If you want to stay here, Jay, it's on you. I can't keep carrying this weight for both of us." The silence that followed was unbearable. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and love, now seemed cold, distant. I couldn't read her anymore. Jay turned away, looking out at the horizon, as if the vast expanse of the sea could somehow offer her the answers she had yet to find. But I knew this was it. This wasn't just a minor disagreement. This was the end of something I had once believed was unbreakable. I wanted to reach out, to take her hand, and make things right. But the gulf between us had widened beyond repair. The choices we had made, the words we had exchanged, had already written the final chapter. The silence that followed our argument was deafening. I stood there, feeling the weight of every word we had exchanged. But Jay remained distant, her back turned to me as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the cliff. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something much bigger than just this trip, something that could change the course of our lives forever. Jay didn't say anything more. She didn't fight me, didn't try to explain herself. She just withdrew. I could feel my heart racing, my chest tightening with every passing second. What was going through her mind? Had I made a mistake? Did I still love her, or had I already let go? The doubts crept in, but I couldn't afford to question myself. Not now, not after everything. I watched her take a deep breath and glance back at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of frustration and sorrow. It was as if she were standing at a crossroads, and I was the one holding her back. But I wasn't the one who had caused this rupture. The truth was, I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman I had fallen in love with was someone who would have communicated her feelings, not dropped a bombshell on me after weeks of silence. "I need to think," she said, her voice low and hollow. "I need space." And with that, she turned away once more, heading back toward the hotel, leaving me standing on that cliff, completely lost. It was over. I knew that now. The trip, the promises, the dreams of a future together, everything we had worked for, felt like it was unraveling in front of me. I didn't know where we went wrong, or when it happened, but I felt the loss deeply. A part of me wanted to chase after her, to beg her to stay, to make everything right again. But I also knew deep down that it was too late. We had already crossed a line from which there was no return. The woman I thought I knew had made her choice, and so had I. The flight back home felt like a blur of endless thoughts, of unanswered questions, and of the deep, aching emptiness that seemed to fill every inch of my being. As soon as I landed, I was hit with the overwhelming weight of reality. The beautiful Italian escape we had envisioned had turned into a nightmare. and there was no escaping it. Jay was still in Italy, and I was here, alone, trying to pick up the pieces of a relationship I didn't even recognize anymore. The silence between us stretched out for days, neither of us reaching out. I didn't know what to say to her, and part of me wondered if she even wanted to hear from me. Every text I started to type, every call I almost made, felt like it would be another reminder of how far apart we had drifted. It wasn't just the distance between our physical locations, it was the distance between our hearts that stung the most. Then, one day, I received a message from her. It was brief, cold even, and yet it felt like a punch to the gut. "I'm still here. I need more time." That was it. No explanation. No effort to make things right. Just the acknowledgement that she was still in Italy, still deciding what to do. But it wasn't just the message itself that tore me apart, it was what it represented. I had given everything to this relationship. I had planned a trip to Italy, poured my heart into trying to fix us, and yet here she was, choosing to stay behind without me. The deeper I thought about it, the more it hurt. I had been trying so hard to prove that I was committed, that I could make this work, and yet every effort felt futile, like I was just grasping at straws while she slipped further away. I couldn't keep waiting for her to decide, for her to come back and pick up where we left off. I needed closure, needed to make a decision for myself before I lost everything. My heart was screaming at me to reach out, to fight for what we had, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just a relationship anymore. It was a battle for my own dignity, my own peace of mind. So, I did something I never thought I would. I cut off all contact. No more waiting, no more hoping. I would move on, no matter how much it hurt. And just like that, I shut the door on a chapter of my life, wondering if Jay would ever understand what had truly been lost between us. It had been weeks since I cut off contact with Jay, yet the silence between us was deafening. I thought the hardest part was over making the decision, pulling the plug on what had once been everything to me. But the truth was, the silence only amplified the pain. I had convinced myself that moving on was the right choice, but the weight of that decision settled heavily in my chest with every passing day. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the empty space where our pictures used to hang, the phone buzzed. It was a message from Jay. My heart skipped a beat, though I didn't want it to. I had moved past this, or so I had told myself. But as I opened the message, the words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm coming back tomorrow. We need to talk." I sat frozen, my breath shallow, my pulse racing. The flood of emotions hit me all at once. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and a deep, gnawing sadness. Why now? Why, after everything that had happened, was she coming back to talk? I had cut her off. I had taken a stand. But here she was, forcing me to confront everything I had tried to escape from. The next day, she arrived at my apartment, her face pale, her eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't read. As soon as I saw her, I knew I couldn't just ignore what was left unsaid. But I wasn't ready to forgive her, not yet, not after everything. She stood there, nervously shifting from foot to foot, as if unsure of how to begin. And then, in the quiet voice, she spoke. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I shouldn't have left. I shouldn't have asked for space. I thought I needed it, but it was never about that. It was about us, about everything I was too scared to face." Her words were soft, almost pleading, but they didn't break the dam that had built up inside me. I had been the one left behind, waiting, hurting, trying to piece together a future that now felt like a distant memory. And as she spoke, I realized the wounds she had left would take more than a few words to heal. I was done with waiting. I had given everything, and it was time to decide whether this was the moment to move on for good. As Jay stood before me, her apology hung in the air, but it did nothing to ease the storm that raged inside me. Her words were soft, pleading, but they felt empty, as if they were trying to patch up a wound that had already begun to scar. I had spent weeks convincing myself that cutting her off was the right decision, that I deserved more than the uncertainty she had left me with. And yet, here she was, asking for forgiveness, asking for something I no longer knew how to give. I shouldn't have left. I was confused, Jay said, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I needed space, but it was always about us, about how I was afraid of losing you, of what I might find out about myself. The words were soft, but they didn't reach me the way they used to. I couldn't forget the look in her eyes when she left, when she decided, without a word to me, that she needed time alone in Italy. I couldn't forget how, even after all the time apart, she hadn't truly understood the weight of the betrayal. Her hands trembled as she reached out to me, but I stepped back. The space between us had grown too wide to bridge with a simple apology. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Jay, I said, my voice strained, each word cutting deeper than I wanted. You had your chance. I tried to be there, but you left without a second thought. Oh, I'm left trying to pick up the pieces. The silence between us was unbearable, as if the very air was thick with all the things we hadn't said. She looked at me with tears welling in her eyes, but I felt nothing but the echo of a love that had once been. And I knew in that moment this was the end. The bridge had burned, and there was no coming back. I had to walk away for my own sanity, my own peace. The silence after my words seemed to stretch endlessly between us, heavy and suffocating. Jay stood there, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, and I could see the regret in every line of her face. She had apologized. She had begged for my forgiveness. But deep down, I knew there was no going back. The damage was done. The cracks in our relationship were too deep, too jagged to be repaired with a few words. It wasn't just about the trip or the decisions she made alone. It was about everything that had led us here. The emotional distance, the neglect, the constant strain of trying to keep a relationship alive while both of us were drowning in our own struggles. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know how to make it right, but I need you to understand I was scared. I didn't know how to face everything that was happening to us. I thought space was what I needed. The vulnerability in her voice almost made me waver. But then I remembered everything I had put aside for this relationship, the way I had ignored my own needs, my own well-being, just to keep trying to hold on. I had given her everything, even when she had stopped giving back. My chest tightened with the realization that, despite all her apologies, she hadn't truly seen the depth of the hurt she had caused. She hadn't fully understood that her actions weren't just a moment of weakness, but a reflection of how little she valued what we had. I can't do this anymore, Jay, I said, my voice hoarse, my heart breaking as I spoke the words. I loved you, but you chose to walk away without any consideration for me. You made your choice, and now I have to make mine. I can't keep waiting for you to figure out what you want. She reached for me again, but this time, I couldn't let her touch me. I had to stay firm, even as my heart ached. I had to protect myself from the same hurt, from the same disappointment that I had felt every time she chose herself over us. And as I walked away, I knew this was the end. The love I once knew had slipped through my fingers, and there was no going back. The days that followed felt like a blur of confusion and disbelief. It had only been a few days since I ended things with Jay, but already the weight of the decision was gnawing at me. It wasn't just the heartbreak, it was the aftermath. The way my mind kept replaying our conversations, our arguments, the things left unsaid. But what hurt most wasn't the end of our relationship, it was the isolation that followed. The people I thought I could lean on, my friends and family, seemed to turn away when I needed them the most. It was as though they couldn't understand the gravity of what I had just experienced. When I reached out to my friends, hoping for some comfort, I was met with their judgment. Mark was the first to message me, his words laced with criticism. "You left her in Italy? That's harsh, man," he said. I tried to explain to make him understand why I had to do what I did, but it felt like nothing I said could make them see the truth. Lisa, another friend, chimed in. Yeah, but cutting her off financially? That feels a little extreme. I could feel the weight of their words, heavy with disapproval, and it only pushed me further into isolation. I tried to defend myself, to explain the betrayal I had felt, but all they saw was a guy who had taken drastic measures. They didn't see the exhaustion in my eyes, the ache in my chest. They didn't understand that this wasn't about money. It was about my dignity, about the principle of respect in a relationship. I had been there for Jay in ways that no one else had. And yet, when I needed her the most, she had turned away without warning. The more I tried to justify my actions, the more isolated I became. I felt like a stranger in my own life, with no one truly understanding the depth of the hurt I was going through. And as I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone, I realized maybe the hardest part of all wasn't just losing Jay, it was losing the people I thought I could rely on too. The isolation was suffocating. As if the betrayal from Jay wasn't enough, now I found myself fighting a battle on two fronts, grappling with the loss of a relationship I had poured everything into, and now dealing with the fallout from friends and family who had once been my support system. Their criticism only deepened the wound. The friends I had hoped would understand, Mark, Lisa, even my own family, were all quick to judge, as though they could see the surface, but not the turmoil beneath it. Each conversation with them left me feeling more disconnected, more alone. But nothing prepared me for the moment when I learned the full extent of what Jay had been hiding. Ben, a mutual friend, reached out one evening, his voice hushed, carrying news that would shatter everything I thought I knew about her. He told me that Jay had borrowed money from friends and family during her time in Italy, money she hadn't told me about. That wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what followed. She had become involved with someone else while there. Ben's words hit me like a punch to the gut. "She's pregnant," he said, "and there's talk she might try to make you believe it's yours." I could feel the ground slip out from under me. The anger that surged in me was overwhelming fury, confusion, betrayal. How could she? How could she do this to me, to us, after everything we had been through? The man I thought I knew, the woman I had once adored, everything seemed like a lie. It wasn't just the affair, it was the manipulation, the deceit, the complete disregard for everything we had built together. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to process the sheer enormity of the situation. I reached out to our mutual friends, hoping for answers, but their reactions only confirmed my worst fears. They had known and never said anything. It felt like I had been living in a shadow, a part of a story that everyone else had already seen. And now, I was left to face the wreckage. The woman I thought I loved was gone. The person I was left to confront in the mirror was a stranger. The truth hit me like a freight train, and in the aftermath, nothing felt real. The shock of Jay's betrayal, the affair, the pregnancy, all blended into a haze of anger and disbelief. I spent days replaying every moment, every conversation, questioning how I could have been so blind. But no matter how many times I tried to make sense of it, the reality was undeniable. She had chosen someone else, and in doing so, she had destroyed everything we had. The hardest part was the silencino messages. No apologies, nothing. I was left in limbo, stuck in the wreckage of a relationship I had given everything for. The betrayal didn't just break my heart, it shattered my trust in everyone. And then came the decision. I couldn't keep living in the past, hoping she would come back and fix what was broken. I had to let go, for my own sanity. I reached out to her one last time, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we had lost. I wanted closure, but all she offered was more lies, more deflection. There was no resolution, no apology that could fix what had been done. I walked away, knowing that no matter how hard it was the only choice left. The man I had been was gone, and it was time to rebuild.